Commission regular meeting for June 17th, 2024. I have the time at 6 o'clock. If we could all please rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. A roll call, please.
Mr. Lane?
Here.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Here.
Mrs. Cope?
Here.
Mrs. Dalton?
Here.
Item number 4, adoption of the agenda. I need a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments on the contents? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item number 5, hearing of the public. None. So, moving on to B, superintendent's report. I have a couple things here. One, just to give an update on strategic plan. We're still in the same place we were last time I gave an update. They'll be here next week to work with the administrative team to review stakeholder input, discuss goals and objectives. I do have a question for the Board of Education. They would like to have 1 hour or less time to kind of go over things with the board to get your input before finalizing the plan. It will be a Zoom call. We could be together, they could be Zoom. We could make the Zoom public and you could do it from, someplace else if you'd like. But we had a couple times coming up in July. July 9th, we will have to have a special board meeting. That can be extremely brief, just because the reason we do a July 9th board meeting is because we have to have people hired before July 10th so they can get out of their contracts with their other schools. And we do have some openings currently that we're still interviewing for. So the first thing I need to do is on July 9th, we can have a very brief meeting, do it early in the morning before you guys go to work. Or if you wanted to do it after work, we could combine the Zoom meeting with that. It's up to you. Or we could just do a really brief meeting on the 9th and then come early on the 15th, which is the regular board meeting, and do the Zoom as a work session before the board meeting for strategic planning. Do you guys have what would work best on the 9th? Let's start with that. Does evening work at 5? Would you prefer to have a morning, very brief meeting for personnel?
I have a 9 o'clock so I could do a very brief one, but if we wanted to add the strategic planning session to it, I probably could not do that.
Okay.
Or we could do the evening.
I can do any time.
Do either one of you have a conflict on the
I'm
9th,
flexible.
either morning?
Yeah,
Knock them both out on the 9th, the evening.
that's totally fine.
Okay. Let's do that. So there's that. And then we will finalize some things on August the 5th. And the goal would be to, at the August board meeting, sort of have some opportunity to present to you what that strategic plan would look like. This is a compulsory opportunity for me to say to you, there's a thing called a one plan. It replaces all other comprehensive plans that ODE used to make us do. And so everything is now included in one spot. It was an extremely lengthy process. Administration had to go through. Basically, we have to, every 3 to 5 years, submit this plan to ODE for our strategic improvement. And we need to provide an opportunity for stakeholders to provide input. So this is me letting you know, board, and letting the community know, anybody who watches this. We'll post something about it as well, but there's an opportunity to go out to our curriculum website. They can see the plan and fill out a feedback form if they would like. So I don't have a whole lot of details for you besides it's something we're required to do every 3 to 5 years and get input on it. The next thing I would like a little bit of input, and I'd like to start by sharing a little bit of kind of calendar committee is, and I shared some options for the calendar with the board. I did not have them on the screen because it would make it too challenging, but the Board of Education is, one of the things you do is you decide what the school calendar is going to be, with input from staff, with input from administration, and you vote on it. So this is not next school year, it would be the following. We have a calendar committee that meets several times a year. I chair that committee. It's members of all staff from all three of our bargaining units and some administrators. The contract states that we need to get input from our teachers. We get input from all staff, but we need to get input from teachers, and that I have to share that input with the board prior to you making a decision. So you're not bound by the input, but I need to share that input with you. So that's kind of why and how we get here a little bit. I think I copied you on the all-staff email board, and this went to all staff. We gave them 4 options. They were minor variations of each other. Option C, as you can see there, it had 152 first place choices out of 252 staff members that responded. It accounted for, between first and second place votes, 180, 190 people. The next closest was option A. It had 54 first place votes. So overwhelmingly, our staff chose option C as the choice. Over half of the people that responded liked that choice. Why is this even a question for consideration, you may ask, when it's an overwhelming choice? Because it doesn't really line up perfectly with what others are doing in the county. So prior to us making a decision as a board, which is not on the agenda tonight, I would just like some input. You can see here, option C is what's highlighted in yellow. I have all of the other Warren County schools, or those that border us. Monroe is on the list as well, listed. I think if you were to look at option A and option C was the clear winner because of, I think, a couple things. It started later in August, it got out before Memorial Day, and there were 2 weeks at Christmas. That's really what they looked at. I think if you were to look at that, a couple things I want to point out. It's later than everybody else starts in August in terms of Warren County with staff, students, pretty close to Waynesville, but Waynesville has 5 days of professional development before school starts. There is no day off any point in time, really, besides federal holidays or Thanksgiving break, Christmas break, and spring break. There's no like scheduled Friday or Monday off for staff anywhere on the calendar. So like in October, when we typically have a sort of a long weekend, students would be off a Friday, Monday, but staff would be required to work on that Friday, Monday because it's a work day and a professional development day. So there is no fall break on that choice. Thanksgiving on that choice is only 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You will notice that everybody else on the calendar except for Monroe had the full week off. We heard a lot of feedback from staff prior to next year's calendar that they wanted the full year off for Thanksgiving. I don't think we've even, maybe, did we have a full week off this year? It's next year that we have the full week off at Thanksgiving, like everybody else in Warren County does. And then now they just voted to go back in 2 years to not have the full week off. So option A does have the full week at Thanksgiving. There is a day off in the fall between Labor Day and Thanksgiving, where staff doesn't have to come to work on a long weekend there at October 20th. It starts roughly the same as everybody else in Warren County, and it gets out the Thursday after Memorial Day for students and Friday after Memorial Day for staff. So I guess I'm just providing you with information. I don't have a whole lot of, I would like any input the board would like to offer on this, or thoughts about calendars, the survey results, or anything that you saw. Does anybody have any input they'd like for me to consider in the next month before we decide on a calendar, or should we put it out to ask families what they think
I
about the calendar.
thought part of the reason for trying to give that whole week at Thanksgiving is because attendance is low that week for students.
Attendance is low for week that students, it is worse at times, in certain places. That was one of the things. I have a concern that if we're the only school in Warren County that's in session, a lot of our staff works here but lives in other districts around us, or so their kids may be off during that week, or their spouses work in other districts around us. I just know that traditionally, in the last 12 years of being a superintendent, that when there are not sort of built-in every once in a while days or those breaks, that it becomes something that staff gets concerned about. So
But they can't take personal days, right? Around
they have 3 personal days.
But I
They
thought there was
cannot
something-
extend a break.
That's right.
So they would not be able to take them on Monday and Tuesday unless there was a reason for them, like my child's getting married on Wednesday in Florida, right, or something, unless there was a reason for that they couldn't avoid.
I personally like C. I think early August is too early, but I think I've been saying that for years.
And
Seems like it always creeps up earlier.
And when I brought up the difference, like I was shocked by the choice that they chose. And a lot of them said they just want to start later in August and they want to be out by Memorial Day. And they're willing to deal with what happens in the middle. I mean, if it should matter what they ask for and that they vote for, I think. I think that's important. That's the reason we have that language in there, that we ask their opinion. But I also just know from experience, those things are probably going to be, in 2 years, they're going to ask why they're the only ones in school during Thanksgiving break. Or our families would ask why they're the only ones in school during Thanksgiving break. Anybody have any thoughts or questions about that?
Waynesville goes really late, so does, that would be option one.
So Waynesville's would be going students on the Thursday after Memorial Day and staff the Friday.
This is 26, right?
It's 25, 26.
This
Yeah.
next year, they're getting out after Memorial Day.
We are,
Yeah.
yes.
So,
Because we started and we had some breaks built in, because the feedback was they wanted some longer weekends every once in a while, plus the week at Thanksgiving. So, it is a board decision. I wanted to make sure you had all the information. If anybody has any thoughts on it or thinks we should be doing something to ask questions in the next month, let me know. But my plan is to bring back, unless there's some objection to it, to bring back a calendar for approval in July. So,
What about fall sports? When do they start?
practices are now like,
The games.
game would be around the time that school would start there on, we've been starting school prior to games starting the last,
Okay.
5 to 10 years almost.
All right.
And the reality was, here's why school began creeping earlier. State tests became much more important 10 years ago. And so schools started school earlier to get as many days of instruction in prior to, state testing windows in April and May. And so that creep has continued to happen earlier in August. And every once in a while you reset it or you just let it happen there. So I think our fall sport coaches would approve of us starting later because they have more weeks of practice prior to school starting then. It helps them, but that wasn't any of the feedback I really got on the survey. So, okay. If you have anything you want to offer, let me know in the next couple weeks and we'll bring something back in July.
Little Miami is almost July, August 6th.
that's too late.
Yeah, of course, that's just staff, but
But they start August 11th is with students, that's a Monday or a Tuesday. but they have a long fall break. They have full week at Thanksgiving. I mean, that's what when we talk to our staff about the calendar, our staff calendar is 184 work days in a year for teachers. And so when you take the work calendar and 184 work days, there are only so many ways that you can make it work. So more breaks in the middle of the year mean that you have to have a longer school year. So, okay. That's it for me.
Thank you. Board committee reports, student achievement liaison,
I don't have anything this month to report.
with the schools out in not in
School's out.
session? I mean,
School's out.
CAT committee?
The CAT committee is also not in session until August, so I have nothing to report, Mr. Lane.
Oh, my gosh.
Legislative liaison, help us out.
Just a few things, that are, stuff is in committee or just passing the House or just passing the Senate right now. House just passed, House Bill 378, which, authorizes a full homestead exemption for surviving spouses of members of uniformed servicemen killed in the line of duty.
So the homestead exemption would obviously impact property
Yes.
taxes for,
Yeah.
that's what that's referring to, what the impact for us would be.
It'd be a small population.
Yeah. But I mean, we also have to, if they've lost a spouse,
Oh,
I
it's
think.
small but
Yeah.
very valuable
Yeah.
population, yes, absolutely.
This one I thought was interesting, House, Bill 178, which is a bill that prohibits public schools and public preschools from discriminating against students because of traits associated with their race, like their hairstyles, braids, locks, twists, things like that. I was unaware that there was nothing that was already in place for that for public schools or that public schools could, so that passed 83-7. So other than that, there's just a lot of things in committee right now. Senate passed a bill, Senate Bill 112, which requires school buildings to comply with national life safety standards. This is called the Ohio Childhood Safety Act. That's about all that has passed. Everything else is still pretty much in committee.
I'm going to send the board a link here that is a weekly update that BASA, my association, sends out. And so if you just want to see what's happening legislatively and not have to wait for the month update from Kim, you can go and look at those weekly to see. And they filter it down based off of what the impact is on education.
Yeah.
So I'll share that with all of you.
Okay. In Warren County Career Center, we actually had 2 meetings since our last meeting. The first one was pretty standard, personnel, normal personnel items, as well as, going over the budget, things like that. And then we met again earlier this month to approve all of their collective bargaining agreements. So good job by all the administration and staff up there working through everything. So that's all I have. So moving on to item number 6, I need a motion to approve the minutes from June 11th, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
I'm sorry, let's do that again. To approve the minutes from May 20th and June 11th, 2024.
So moved. Second.
All right, thank you. Any questions on those 2 sets of minutes? Roll call, please.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item number 7, I need a motion to approve the financial items A through O.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Mrs. Irvin?
So we're on the running stretch here, ending stretch. This is our new forecast for May. Nothing new and exciting, because that was new and exciting last month. So this should look pretty familiar to you. We are 11 months in. Looking at cash balances, we're sitting at 134 days operating cash. Our target is about 120. We think we'll end this month with about 123 days. So really right on target, doing pretty much as we expected based on the forecasting. So specifically, at this point in time, you should see about 92% of your expenses and revenues having been received or spent. Revenues, we've received 97%. The variance there, very small. Again, I say this every time, but this is because of property tax. It's our largest driver of revenues, and those payments have been received. So things that we still have outstanding, we have one last payment from the state foundation to receive, and that will be substantial, and that will get us probably the remaining 3% there. On the expense side, we've spent about 91%, and this has kept true all year long, which is really, really pretty exciting for me as a finance nerd over here. It's just 1% less than our target. So we're budgeting properly is what that tells me, right? So we're not putting so much in the budget that we're not spending it, but also we're not putting so much in the budget that we're spending it, right? And so it's really good news for me. This is the snapshot from our forecast software, just showing you where we're at. These are really big dollar amounts on the top. So when you look at almost 67 million projected revenue, and our forecast or our cash balance exceeds our forecast by only 300,000, that's pretty good, right? I think that speaks a little bit to the forecast and that it will be pretty accurate for this year, which hopefully it will be because I just did it last month, right? One of the things that happened this month that I wasn't expecting and why you see that large amount is we received an extra TIF payment that was higher than I was expecting. So great for business, right? On the expense.
We weren't expecting a TIF payment at all, or it was higher than we
It was
expected?
higher.
Okay.
Yep. The expense side, very, very close. Again, 69 million, and we're off by about 100,000. So really, really close there. And I kept it really short this time because we had a lot of options or a lot of things to look at. So any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay. Just to read through the rest of these, C is amended appropriations, D amended certificate of estimate resources, E temporary appropriations, F is a list of donations, and the Bowman PTO knocked that out of the park with that playground equipment. G, approved board resolution and payment in lieu of transportation. We do that every year. Is this the right school year, though?
Yeah, so we had to go backwards. We had some people that basically we had to get caught up. They were
Okay.
partial years. And so just a reminder to the board that if we have private schools that we do not transport to, but they're within the required radius of required transportation, then we have to offer them a payment in lieu of bus transportation. And so some of these were prorated on partial year enrollments and things like that.
Gotcha.
So.
H is approve the facility use, rental property or rental personnel costs. I approve the Lebanon City Schools breakfast lunch prices. J, approve the agreement between Lebanon City Schools and Hamilton County Educational Services. K is a couple of then and nows.
You'll start to see these at the end of the year as we pick up getting all of our invoices paid or vendors trying to get their money. So just they didn't have a purchase order in place, so we got it. We had the money. It was already budgeted. You had approved it. We just didn't have a purchase order in place.
L is Lebanon High School student fees for the next school year.
So this is something that you historically have not approved. However, you've always approved the elementary buildings. So this year, I put it all together with the junior high and the elementary, and then I thought, you know what, you probably should see the high school as well. So last month we did the younger grades, this time is the high school. Now, one of the things we need to note for parents especially is the handbooks that got sent out were proposed pricing. This will be the actual pricing. So there will be some courses that are different from the handbook that was sent out earlier to this list.
Excuse me. M, activity purpose and budget statements.
And those are just stragglers for next year.
N, temporary certificate of estimated resources. And O, advances.
So if you recall, I think it was last year, we were doing monthly advances and our auditors came in and said, you don't need to do that often. So we set up just an annual. However, June 30 is going to happen before your next board meeting. So I just put a blanket in here that you all authorize me to whatever fund needs the advance, I can make that and bring it to you in July for final approval.
Perfect. Moving on to, yes, we do. Roll call, please.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Roy knew you were going to call his name first, so he really wanted to vote on that. Item number 8, policies. I need a motion to approve the first reading of policy 5136.
So moved.
Second.
So if there's any high school students reading, a good time to turn off the presentation for the evening. The high school administration has asked for the Board of Education to consider a change in policy. I'm going to go through some things about why here in a second. It did not go onto the screen. There it goes. This would be the proposed change in policy. This is the language that's actually in our policy. We would be changing some grades. I guess, so we would stay in preschool through 8th grade, not being able to use personal communication devices on school grounds during school hours. And shift at the high school, they could use them before and after school, during their lunch break, during after-school activities such as extracurriculars, or school functions, as long as they are not a distraction or disruption to otherwise interfere with the educational environment. Why? Well, a couple of reasons. Our high school staff is looking at scheduling, and they visited several high schools this year to look at what other schools are doing in terms of scheduling. How can they get more intervention time built into their day? What are ways that we can have maybe some flexible scheduling to kind of get more modern with that, if that's possible, to get a little bit of some things. And so they came back from this, they visited 2 high schools right towards the end of school. And they came back, and I believe both high schools had implemented this policy. And as they met with staff members from those districts, staff members had talked about the impact that it had on their school, and the education in the classrooms. And so they asked Mr. Reynolds, is that something that we would consider? So he said, well, there's only 8 of you, or 10, or whatever the number was. Let's see what the rest of your colleagues say. And so they put it out. Would you be in favor of keeping our current cell phone policy or making a change? 81.3% says we need to change what we're doing right now. This isn't working. What's happening with the high school in terms of cell phone use, it was not working. So that was the first step. The second step was if you wanted to change. So they had 93 responses, 81% of them, or 91 responses, 81% of them. So they went to the next of those yeses. 83% said, let's adopt the cell phone policy the junior high has, keep it in your locker. Some of them said, let's use the policy, what's become kind of popular right now. You see it on several news stories where kids are going into school and they get this mechanically locking little plastic bag thing that their cell phones have to go into, or park it. You can see some teachers have little things along the wall. Their cell phones go into those slides, or adopt some version of a red, yellow, and green. If it's red, no cell phones. Yellow, green, you can have some of it. So you see there, the staff feedback was 61.4. So they send this over and ask if we would consider something. Literally the very next day, we hear from the governor's office that the state legislature has passed a new state law requiring all schools to have a cell phone policy by July 2025. They provided their model policy for us. Their model policy recommends the prohibition of cell phone use by students at all times during school. The state didn't go as far to say we're outlawing cell phones in schools. They left it up to local control. And then the governor has said multiple times since then, we believe the best choice for you to make is to not allow schools, cell phones in schools. And here is why. This is something that was their rationale, what they included right on the front page of their cell phone model policy. Talks about the negative effects on student performance and mental health. Cell phones distract students from classroom instruction, resulting in smaller learning gains and lower test scores. Increased cell phone use has led to higher levels of depression, anxiety, and other mental health disorders in children. So we began to talk about it. It's a requirement for 2025. But I said to everybody, if we believe it's the right thing to do, then why do we wait for a year? If everybody in the room says this is the right thing to do, and we're going to tell people 1 year in advance we're going to do it, I don't think that makes any sense to do.
And with the success of the junior high program.
So what I have, I asked for some feedback from the junior high administration in terms of what they saw in terms of the building. I'll share that with you in a second. That's why we brought this forward. Board policy requires 2 readings. This is the first reading. I would like to know input or things that you have. We obviously will begin to communicate with families that this is something we're considering. I would expect that you'll hear from people maybe. But here are some, and I know it's a lot of texts. I'm not going to read this to you, but these are direct quotes from Mr. Brunk and Mr. Camello. So our staff have noted that students are more attentive and engaged during lessons. Less instructional time is lost due to teachers fighting about cell phones use in class. I like this story they included. I took the student's name out and the teacher's name, but one teacher mentioned a particular instance where a student who previously struggled to stay focused on more than a few minutes at a time is now actively participating and even helping peers understand complex topics. I can tell you from my own child's experience, he didn't like it at first, but he also said that he paid a lot more attention in class this year than he did the year before. So that's Abe for you, right? He would not like me calling him out like that in the board meeting, but that's the unofficial feedback from one 8th grade, now freshman. This is the bigger issue, and I think one of the things we've talked about is, so as we communicate, something that I have been doing a lot more just since this all came about is looking at research. I met recently with the folks at Safe on Main, met with their director. We talked about this. There's a recent research study out that says social media use by children prior to the age 16, there is a extremely high correlation between mental health disorders and suicidal ideations for social media use prior to the age of 16. A lot of the research talks about how they can't regulate it. And I want to use myself as an example here. My kids go to bed, I sit and look at my cell phone, the next thing I know, I've been scrolling for a while. Nothing, I don't know, nothing productive, right? And so they have a hard time just putting it down. What we had noticed in the past and what changed this year with the middle school, did fights still happen? Absolutely. Fights happened before cell phones were even invented, right? Roy was still using corded phones, at his house, right? No, I think cell phones aren't the reason that we have school fights. I will tell you that the misuse of cell phones contributed to a lot more discipline issues for us. So what would happen is people would post something on social media, they were constantly going back to look and see, did they see it? Did they share it? Did they interact with it? And something that was said on social media gets seen 4th period, and next thing you know, it's on at lunch. A lot of those incidents have really dwindled. And so that second thing there, disciplinary issues, we did have some feedback and some concern from some families that said, what do we do? I remember one specific conversation from when this first was rolled out, and it was more about what happens in the event of an emergency. I talked with students this year, this is from the middle school staff and administration. I talked to some students this year, and they said, my brother is in the military, right? And something happened, and I wouldn't have known if my mom wouldn't have texted me. And we talked about it as administration. We would want that kid to be in the office around caring adults if they were taking a bad phone call from a parent about something that happened to a family member. And able to process that, not alone receiving that text message or phone call. So we have seen a positive change at the junior high, and it has impacted the learning environment there. It would be my recommendation that we move forward with this at the high school. It's a board policy and it's a board decision. And so I've shared this with you. I sent this to the board previously, but any thoughts, questions, feedback on the policy change, concerns about that?
I think it's a step in the right direction, and I'm just wondering if there's some education that is going to take place at the beginning of the school year so that it's not perceived as a negative, that we can share all the positive aspects of doing this from an education standpoint.
So-
Even from the students, I think that once they're free from this device, we all can see the benefits, but it's a hard habit to break.
Oh, it's absolutely. So what we've talked about is really this has to be we share a lot of information about things that are happening in our district. Like, hey, here's a picture of some kids that did this, right? What I would really like for us to do as a district is in these areas where I doubt parents are reading research on cell phone, social media, and the connection to mental health. Not a whole lot of them if they are, right? We have access to information because of what we receive on a regular basis, right? That we can be sharing some of those things. Not that Isaac Sievers has all the answers. I have a cell phone problem myself, right? But do we have information that we can share, and what are the reasoning for it, right? And some of the positive stuff. I mean, Mr. Brunk sent me a video from early in the school this year at lunch. Typically, if you were to go watch lunch, they would eat and they would be on their phone, and there was very little interaction. I don't know about junior high kids this year. There was like dancing in the cafeteria and dance about it. His comment to me was this would have never happened if cell phones would have been there before, because kids they didn't feel free to be goofy without it being on a video and showing up as, look at Isaac being stupid at lunch, right? And so I think there were some of those things that maybe they won't even recognize, but there are benefits to it. I know my kids, when they go away for a week of camp and they can't have a cell phone, I asked them how they do, and they said the first day it was rough, and then I really enjoyed it the rest of the week. I didn't stress about looking at my phone all day long, and I felt like I could just be free. So I think those are some of the benefits that we hope that we can
Can you
Sure.
go back to the policy itself? And two thoughts here. So number one, complete agreement with this. Alexa went to college freshman orientation, and they brought up the cell phone problem. The kids coming in lacking communication skills, lacking engagement skills. So they've recognized that freshman orientation, they've got a problem that they have to deal with that's getting passed along. The one concern I have is and this is more for the faculty, how do they monitor this? Smartwatches, some have
Right.
cell service, some don't.
Yeah.
So, and then now you've got Ray-Ban sunglasses that have internet access. So
Yeah.
there's just, this list can go on, but I also don't want the staff to feel like they're constantly policing something. Like, how do you handle this? If you see the kid on their watch, that's the problem. Or if they're wearing one, where's the line?
So I can tell you at the junior high, I do believe that they were still allowed to wear smartwatches to school. I know, for example, you got in trouble if the teacher noticed that you were clearly doing more writing letters on your watch than you were, things like that. So, a big issue is headphones as well, right? People wearing AirPods, not, not engaging at all, or we don't know what's on the AirPods. And so I think that was more of a hard line of, your phone's in your locker. There's no reason for you to be wearing AirPods.
Yep.
Unless the phone's not in the locker and you're actually doing something on it. So it would be more to do with, because some people smartwatches and other devices. Those are 3 paragraphs, right? 2-sentence paragraphs. Those are 3 paragraphs out of a longer board
Right.
policy that was sent to you. And that personal communication device is sort of the heading at the beginning. So it talks about if it's for medical purposes, the cell phone can still be there. If it's blood glucose monitoring, any of those things that it's part of their IEP, part of their 504 plan, whatever that may be. So there are some carve-outs and exceptions that are more to do with medical exceptions as well. They did discuss whether the junior high does not allow them to have them at lunch. And I believe a big part of the reason they were going to allow it at lunch break is just because there's no possible way to police the high school cafeteria at lunch for cell phone use. There's 400 kids at a time in there, and so I think that was more of, let's trust you to be a responsible person during that time, and give you the access to view it in the middle of the day. So it was left as an allowable use.
And the policy can be adopted if it's not working.
It
That
can be
part of it.
modified, absolutely.
I think it's a good idea.
I do too.
I do too.
Absolutely.
I think it's good.
So it's the first reading, you don't have to vote on anything tonight, but final reading in July. And we will begin to work on some communication stuff with families about it. Mr. Reynolds has been working on those things and kind of just waiting to see what the initial response was tonight. So, thank you.
I do need them to vote on the first reading.
Sorry, they do need to vote on the first reading. I'm just here for the show, I don't know.
So, any other questions before roll call, comments? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton? Yes. Motion carried.
Item 9, other educational items. I need a motion to approve the 2024 Lebanon High School graduates.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item number 9 is public records requests. Item number 11, personnel items. I need a motion to approve items A through O.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. I'll read through these. A is retirements. Congratulations, Earl.
Earl has, I think, served his last day in the district. He's taken some vacation time here at the end. So those of you who know Earl, has been a staple since he started here at school, and he will be very missed. I told the joke on the last workday with all the staff down the board in the auditorium. Then when I first got the job, they asked me if I'd met my associate superintendent yet, and I said I didn't think I had one of those. They said, "Oh yeah, you do. He's the HVAC technician." And Earl was a great resource and will be missed, but he's still going to come back and sub bus and be around at events. So he's not
You
gone.
won't be able to keep him away.
He's not gone forever.
B is a list of resignations. C is employment, pending background checks. D is substitute employment. E is supplementals. F is a board resolution for non-licensed coaches. G, supplemental volunteer coaches. H is a list of change of status.
I did get one question about this, and so I just want to point out, just as change of status is when we hire somebody, we hire them at the smallest step. So if it's a teacher, they're at bachelor step 0. So for example, Elizabeth there on the top of the second page, we hired her at bachelor step 0 because we just wanted to get her a contract in hand. But once we review her transcripts and her years of experience and things from elsewhere, then we go back and do a status change. So that's what happens here is once we have all the information in hand. The other thing I do want to point out to you is, Elizabeth, for example, that's not common, but what we know we're having to do in a lot of these situations is it's very hard to find certain types of teachers. So for example, intervention specialists are almost impossible to find, and we needed multiple. So we were trying to go through the process and looking for those teachers with lesser experience and things like that. We can find some good young or less experienced staff members, but then the reality is in certain positions, they're not available and it's not possible. So we also, so that's what we do. That's a change of status. Every once in a while, I try to just remind people of why these people change before they ever start working for us. So.
I is a list of volunteers. J is a list of tutors.
I got another question from a board member about tutors as well. So I wanted to point out home instruction. Home instruction is when we are required to provide compensatory education for a child. So maybe the child is on an IEP or has a medical issue or something and they are missing school. And so we provide then instruction for them at home at a specified rate. Typically that rate is, it's based off of the hourly rate for a certain position we have in a district. So we only are doing home instruction under the circumstances when the child's IEP or medical condition requires us to educate them if they can't come to school. ESY is extended school year. And that is a compensatory service that we have to provide if a child is not making the academic gains or they have some deficiencies for students that are, students with a disability. And if they didn't make enough progress during the year and we look at the amount of services they received and think, man, they need a little bit more occupational therapy or they need a little bit more reading support. It's an IEP team decision. It's a requirement of federal IDA in some circumstances for children with disabilities. So that's home instruction and ESY. Those are a couple clarifying things there. And then classified tutors, those are folks that are working for us. They don't have a teaching license, but they're performing tutoring either in the building or available if somebody needs that outside of school. So,
Thank you. K is stipends. L is a list of extended days. M, leave of absence and unpaid days. N, seasonal worker. And O is administrative contracts.
So I did want to just touch base because I think we're going to get, I've discussed with the Board of Education multiple times about this. We've been discussing this for a while. The role of assistant superintendent, we've looked at this in terms of really how do I function as a superintendent and what jobs are uniquely mine in the role that I can't pass off to other people. And so when I have those jobs that are uniquely mine, I can't pass off to other people, and then the day-to-day stuff sometimes is the challenge. So how can we look at sort of layers within the district that provide some additional support? So we are not adding administrators. You'll notice these two gentlemen who are being recommended for this position tonight are already district administrators. They're directors. Brian Dalton is our HR director. Mark Grayler is our curriculum and instruction director. Elevating them to assistant superintendent, they will still function in the exact same role that they were in, but will have increased responsibilities. And the other thing, we've talked about this as a board, I've shown this to you in the numbers. Due to some other restructuring in central office between my office and Karen's office, we were actually able to make this change without increasing our overall payroll as a district administration offices between the treasurer and the superintendent's office, actually based off of what it was at the end of 2023-24 school year, a slight reduction in expenditure. And so we think it does a couple things for us. I'm going to share this with our staff before the evening is over, so this word is going to be out. But it will allow, there's just several benefits. I've shared this with our administrators already. It will allow me to be less involved in some day-to-day operations and more involved in strategic planning, community engagement, board leadership, things that are uniquely I'm uniquely responsible for. It allows there to be a layer in the leadership structure. And so, typically what would happen right now is, let's say somebody was going to talk to Mr. Dalton about, I need some positions, I need some support in this area. They're going to him as the HR director. He has no authority to add those positions, at that time. So then it becomes, you go to talk to Isaac, and then I'll go talk to Isaac. And we've added layers and meetings on the folks to do something, instead of saying, Brian and Mark will be clear on kind of the direction we're going, and we would regularly meet, and some of those meetings could be cut out. So we hope that it would empower them to make some decisions, and do some more things to be more involved in day-to-day. The last thing I just want to point out, this was, and looking at it, I think it's worth pointing out, we are one of 2 schools in Warren County that doesn't have an assistant superintendent. This is not uncommon for school districts our size. The other school district that does not have an assistant superintendent in Warren County is Waynesville. And so we are doing so in a way that doesn't add administrators, it just change responsibilities. So that will be my recommendation for these 2 gentlemen this evening, and their contract information is there. So. Any questions or comments?
Comments? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item number 12, appointment of new board member. I need a motion to nominate a new Board of Education member.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Before we do this, I do want to publicly thank all the applicants that we received for this. Probably a higher number than we expected, and a great quality of applicants across the board. Because of that, I would encourage, if people still want to stay involved, to consider running for election next fall, or after. So please stay involved in the schools. Again, we appreciate those of you that took the time to apply. At this time, I need nominations from the floor. Any nominations?
I would like to nominate Michael Gliotti.
Any other nominations? Do I have a motion to close the nominations?
So moved.
Second.
Karen, help me out here. We don't do this very often.
Yep.
Okay.
Let me
Good so
take a-
far?
Oh, yes, let me take a roll call vote on that one.
Okay, so we're gonna take a roll call on the motion to close.
Yes. Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item number 3, I need a motion to appoint.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yes.
Mrs. Cope?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Motion carried.
And item number 4 is the oath of office. Mr. Gliotti is here this evening. Karen, I think you're gonna do the honors, correct?
Yes. Do you care to get on the mic so everyone can hear you? All right, if you would, please repeat after me. I, and state your name,
I, Mike Gliotti,
solemnly affirm
solemnly affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
and that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge my duties
discharge my duties
as a member of the Board of Education
as a member of the Board of Education
of the Lebanon City School District,
of the Lebanon City School District,
Warren County, Ohio,
Warren County, Ohio,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
in accordance with the laws now in effect
in accordance with the laws now in effect
and hereafter to be enacted
and hereafter to be enacted
during my continuance in said office,
during my continuance in said office
and until my successor
and until my successor
is elected and qualified.
is elected and qualified.
You are official.
Don't leave the podium yet, but Karen took it easy on you. She broke that down into small chunks.
Yeah,
We had
it was a lot
paragraphs.
I was
harder
going to
for
say,
us.
you guys had multiple sentences before.
Focus.
I mean, ours was, yeah. Yeah,
We didn't have that either. It was
Yeah.
just, remember these 24 words in a row.
yeah.
Mike, if you would like to introduce yourself to the public, because you're on a live mic there, and maybe a little bit about yourself. And
First, I would like to thank the board for your consideration, and I am honored to serve with you. I'm very excited to work for positive outcomes for our students, staff, faculty, and our community as well. I am a father of two, have been in the Lebanon area for 22 years now. I own a couple businesses here in town, and I love our schools, I love our town, and I really look forward to helping in any way that I can, and I'm very committed to do so.
Okay, perfect. I think Karen or Jessica probably be reaching out to get emails and all that.
Yeah, so
set up.
Jessica Centers will reach out to you to get some information, to make sure we have access to the things that you need to have access to. And so I hope you were paying attention earlier when we decided that we have a July 9th meeting. We did not consult with you on that.
You can't miss your first meeting either,
So that would be, Jessica will reach out to you because we'll have to get you a school email account and the things that you need for that. So, and get access to everything they have access to. Would you like to introduce the people that you have with you this evening, or
I
will they?
would like to introduce my wife, Mindy Gliotti, and my daughter, Isabella Gliotti, who is a graduate of Lebanon City Schools and the Warren County Career Center. And my son, Sal, is an incoming freshman, so we're real excited for him as well.
excellent. Well, congratulations.
Thank you all very much.
I did have a question for Mr. Gliotti.
As long as that's not for me, you can ask away.
So he gets the vote to take his own son's cell phone away.
Yes, he does.
That'll be a discussion.
Before you leave this evening, I'd like to get a picture of you and the other board members before we go, so they can get the information out tomorrow to our community. So, thanks.
Outstanding, will do.
And we did this at the end of the meeting, so you weren't bombarded with all this information without access to it prior to the meeting. So congratulations, you are an official member of the school board.
Thank you very much. Look forward to serving with you.
And that being said, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
They were fast on that one.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Lane,
Yes.
Mrs. Cope,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mr. McCutcheon.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you.